You are mad as hell and not gonna take it anymore with Trash Radio.
Hi, I'm Stained Haynes and this is Trash Radio. There's a decent chance you're here all the way in the beginning, at the start of a quest, and where you find something you can cancel me for. Well, the good and bad news is that we're single-digit years away from getting canceled to being a way to relate to other people. Someone listening to this is going to be asked, "Hey, what'd you get canceled for? Did you drop kick a trans person into a volcano?" They're going to go, "No. I just pointed out that only males can have male pattern baldness or prostate cancer." Someone else listening to this is going to be asked, "Hey, I noticed next week on Wednesday, you're going to get crucified upside down, and everyone is going to stand in a single file line, each with a Dixie cup of boiling diarrhea in their hand that they give out in the front gate where they take the tickets, and they splash it in your face as you're gasping for air, and the last moments of your life are pure agony, like screaming for your dead mother agony. What'd you do?" And that person is going to go, "I cited Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam." So hopefully you could find something and hold it up to the light before this happens. And I really wish you the best of intelligence, because luck runs out when we need it the most. I was born and raised here in Queens. This borough is one of 5 here in New York City. Staten Island only kind of counts, really. We could probably trade it for Yonkers or parts of Long Island, but I digress. Queens is the birthplace of Christopher Walken, Anthrax, half of Stormtroopers of Death, Martin Scorsese, Eric B. from Eric B. and Rakim, Lucy Liu, Jon Favreau, and plenty others. I'll let Wikipedia and Google do the heavy lifting here, but I'll have you know, if fictional characters count, Archie Bunker and Spider-Man. That's a tough act to follow. I don't care where you're from. If there's a fictional character that could match up with either one of them, let me know, and I'll send you a shirt. If you can make a good enough argument, shit. That shirt is yours and you earned it. Time is a flat circle, and now a bunch of people are saying what Archie Bunker is saying. And Spider-Man turned out to be one of the most endearing, thankless heroes that gets the universal praise that eluded him for so many years, decades even. Also, I'm fairly certain people don't move to your town and after like 2 years they say they're from there. I know that's not exclusive to here in New York City, but I mean, go heart your own damn city. Queens is the most ethnically diverse urban county in these United States. I went to school with kids from countries I had to find on a globe. I know those don't exist anymore, so just, you kids just pretend I had to look it up on a functional broadband internet that didn't exist back then. Man, it feels like a zillion years ago. Back when Myanmar was Burma, and back when Ethiopia was synonymous with famine instead of cuisine, and a small subsection of people who are thirstier than thirsty for baddies from that region. It's crazy. You know, Ethiopia has an Orthodox church, if I'm not mistaken. Their ikonas look a lot like the ikonas you find in other Orthodox churches. Oh, and it should be noted that in the beginning of the Odyssey, Zeus was to play host to the Ethiopians. So everyone was out to dinner when that kicked off. And you know how it goes. They're all like, hey, Odysseus, we should give something to Poseidon so we could have a safe journey home. And he's like, no. And then the Odyssey happened. Good times. Anyways, I can't prove this, but I believe it to be true. The Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia. Hey, remember that pricing exodus I was telling you about? Well, if you live in a city, I don't know what that's like. But I could tell you what it's like here, in mine. Now, Manhattan rents surged 23% in January compared to the same month last year, approaching record highs reached just before the 2020 onset of Chinese lung herpes. The median price of an apartment rental in Manhattan was $3,467 last month, according to a new report by real estate appraiser Miller Samuel. He does good work. The record for the highest ever median rental price in the borough for the month of January was set in 2020 when Manhattanites are paying $3,472. According to the data, there was a significant decrease in the number of listings on the market. In January of last year, there were 25,883 apartments in Manhattan that were listed for rent. Last month, that number plummeted to just 4,316. It's an 83% drop. Nothing to scoff at. The record high median rental price for any month in Manhattan was set in April 2020 when tenants paid $3,540, just 2.1% above the latest January level. However, in December, the average cost of Manhattan apartment rentals surged to the highest ever for that month, with landlords demanding double-digit rent increases amid sharply dwindling supply. I'd love to say I'm so glad it'll all work out in the end, but, you could hope in one hand and shit in the other and see which one fills up first. The median rental price for Manhattan properties, including discounts, hit $3,392 in December, the highest for that month in more than a decade of record keeping and up 21% from the year earlier, December. When Chinese lung herpes was declared to be a pandemic, just weeks later and the state imposed closures and restrictions, it triggered a mass exodus of residents who fled the city for the suburbs, or back to wherever the fuck they came from, where they continued working from home, hopefully, assuming they're not daddy's money or just shit out of luck. And as a result, rent prices dipped considerably. But that is in the world of Manhattan. Let us look at the world outside of it. The lifting of lockdown measures and the vaccine mandates have brought New Yorkers back to the 5 boroughs, where a lack of inventory coupled with high demand has sent rent prices skyrocketing once again. But renters won't find much relief in the outer boroughs. The median rent in Brooklyn for the month of January increased 11.1% to $2,747 compared to January 2021, according to the report. Available apartments for rent in Brooklyn also decreased considerably last month. There were just 2,780 apartments listed for rent in the borough for the month, which was an 86.4% drop compared to January of 2021, where renters could pick up from nearly 20,500 vacant units. And over here in my neck of the woods, the median rental price for apartments in Northwest Queens rose by more than 28% last month compared to the same period last year. Renters here, some of these motherfuckers are paying $2,800 or more. And last year it was around like $2,185. I'm telling you, it's no es fácil. In fact, I'm lucky that I've been in this apartment for as long as I've been here. My landlord is a fucking Malacca. I'm half Malacca. That's the only reason he ever rented out to me in the first place. Hey, it's not just Chinese renting out to their own in Flushing. That shit happens all over this borough and all over this city. Now, the reason everyone gets along here in Queens is because, for the most part, everyone keeps to themselves. Yeah, I know, that might sound like insensitive or, heavens to Betsy, crying henny penny, the sky is falling. I mean, first of all, racism and discrimination is normal, and suppressing every last racist thought is a neurotic and unhealthy thing to do. Being able to joke about our discrimination, not just towards other groups, but even our own. No one ever wants to talk about how magnificently grimy racism can easily be seen in any big city, where it's Asians towards other Asians, blacks towards other blacks, Latinos towards other Latinos especially. And, the honky on honky hatred, that happens outside the United States. That's still no reason why you don't want to show footage of the Balkan Wars in the hood, just so they could be like, wow, look at these crazy-ass white boys. And I'd be like, I know, right? If I'm lucky, I'll show Portlandia to them and just convince them it's a documentary. So then, when they see similar-looking people eventually moving into their neighborhood, they'll know what to do. So, for the most part, everyone keeps to themselves. Now, there are exceptions, like, a Colombian would be more open to a Mexican moving in next door rather than, a Korean moving in next door. Greeks are much more likely to let an Italian move in next door than, say, someone from Tonga. And even to a degree, they might even let a Turk move in next door before they let someone from, again, Tonga. Hey, no disrespect, Tonga. I mean, you've got enough to deal with as is, right? Also, there are some sections in Queens that only rent out to their own. Like half of Flushing only rents out to their Chinese brothers and sisters. But the same thing can be found in East Elmhurst or Jackson Heights, where like Latinos only rent out to Latinos, Southeast Asians only rent out to Southeast Asians. And then even among that, only Bangladeshis in these row of apartments, or only Pakistanis in this one stretch of Northern Boulevard, or only Indians from this one particular section of India in this little pocket of Elmhurst. So, yeah, it's an unpopular opinion to say out loud because it shatters and undermines a lot of the weirdo, race-obsessed pyramid of gripe that people are beholden to. And that whole thing is bizarre to me. Like, just all right. While we're on topic, that whole bizarre gripe pyramid, the Pulse shooter was a Muslim guy, and he shot up a LGBT event at a nightclub. A lot of people were got, but evidently Islam outranks the LGBT community, so no one ever said a thing about that. In fact, bringing it up will get you accused of being called an ist who harbors an ism and possibly a phobia. Which is strange because we're supposed to believe it's all kumbaya, my lord, holding hands around a campfire, even though intersectionality has conflicting values that only cease when used as a cudgel against the working class. Because after all, wealth is the one true privilege. And identity politics is an excellent way to sublimate time and energy from left-wing factions to make sure that no existing power structures are threatened. And as much as I want to say that QAnon was the same thing for right-wing energies, it was more like an attempt to de-radicalize right-wing elements courtesy of DARPA. And it kind of came off as like the 5% nation for white people. It was so weird. I've had a particular and unique front row seat to the gray, featureless, inbred blob of gentrification that just smothered parts of this borough. It's nowhere near as bad as what happened to Brooklyn. And let it be known that whatever the hell happened in Brooklyn, it was by design and applied elsewhere, fine-tuned to the idiosyncrasies of each location, and it follows the same cycle no matter what. Now, mind you, things have changed because now you can't outright discriminate against LGBT people in terms of housing. Oh, you could still discriminate against them a plethora of other ways, but now it's in law that you can't do it regarding housing. So you'd have neighborhoods where broke, starving artists and LGBT people move in because rent is cheap. And they're usually fucked up neighborhoods. It's so weird how Crown Heights and Williamsburg and Bushwick were synonymous with, what the fuck are you going there for? No one will believe you if you say that in like the 80s and up to the early and mid 90s, if it was late at night and you were in Manhattan and you hailed a taxi and you're like, I'm going to Williamsburg, they'd be like, nah. It is kind of strange because having sideline box seats of it all here in Queens that had its own weird influx of people that totally didn't belong. It was hard not to feel like some signal or memo went out as if guided by radar. The same like 11 archetypes of useless jerk-offs are now moving in that look just like the broke, starving artists and also happen to be LGBT friendly. All right? Like seriously, like in the 2000s, you hardly ever met like right-wing hipsters. They existed, but there's like 3 of them. Anyways, then the neighborhood is the hip new place to be. So you have like double income, no kid types moving in. Like new money, like people who work in startups. A lot of them are interchangeable too. People who want to live in New York City but can't afford Manhattan. And then eventually, you got like trust fund kids and foreign nationals on permanent staycation that again look similar enough to the broke, starving artists where they could blend in with the second wave. And at that point, it's only a matter of time until young professionals and finance bros and even jerk-offs who work at Goldman Sachs are living in a place like Williamsburg. Like, it wasn't just landlords selling buildings, making money hand over fist. And not just in Brooklyn, even here in Queens, right not too far from Queensboro Plaza, you're seeing yuppie kennels being built as if they're in a race to see who could touch the sky first. And kind of like how Portland became a place for like younger, old people to retire, now that's Williamsburg. So you see this cycle occur with varying degrees of striking similarities, and of course, things fine-tuned for the location it's applied on. But that's been happening since before Williamsburg. I think it's just, with Williamsburg, it was like much more deliberate and focused. However, that's no excuse to say something like, you know, Brooklyn diversity is like 5 white people and a mixed race person in a coffee house. And Queens diversity is getting off like the wrong train, and then you're lost in like Little Italy and you're getting catcalled and cursed out in languages you have no subtitle for, you know, and all the off-the-boat women are giving you that look like they're scared of you and want to marry you at the same time. And if you're really hung up on the music and food thing, like, yeah, you could go to a place where nothing on the menu's in English and whoever's behind the counter will make nice enough for you and your dirty outsider ass and send you along your merry way and hope you don't come back and blow their spot, because their place is meant only for the locals. The best example of this is Chinatown, but you could find this all over the 5 boroughs. Except kind of sort of Staten Island, because like, again, I'll take Yonkers over Staten Island any day. No offense, Staten Island, but come on, get it together. Yeah, Brooklyn ate it pretty bad, but it doesn't make what happened here in Queens any less shitty. For the longest time, I used to be able to walk to the train station and know at least one person on every block. And if not know them personally, it'll be like, oh, like, on this block is Maria, and she went out with Louis Vargas in middle school. And then on the next block, it's like, hey, Nikita's on this block. Like, we had geometry in sophomore year in high school. And then on the next block, it's like, hey, Brian Smith's family lives here. He moved to wherever the fuck, I don't know, but his mom and dad are still in the neighborhood. Then the next block. Hey, that's where Redacted lives. Deadline, if you're listening, I don't want to blow your spot, but I've left more psychic residue on that stoop than anywhere else outside of where I've lived. But yeah, I was able to do that from where I was born and raised all the way to the train station. And then one day, I'm walking home from school. In the very last quarter of high school, I got out at like 12:25 because I had more or less fulfilled all my credit requirements for graduation. There's a long stretch of road, 14th Street, and for a while, and to a degree it still is a mostly Central American little corner of Astoria. And I remember one day there was like a U-Haul truck. There were these two white guys, and they were unloading the U-Haul truck, and they looked really out of place. Like everything, even down to like their skin, not just their clothing. Because they didn't look like dirty white kids from like Hell's Kitchen. They didn't look like fucking German Stunads or like, you know, try-hard Guinea Dago Wops from Glendale. They didn't look like Polacks from Greenpoint. They didn't look like dudes you see hanging out outside a barbershop in Brighton Beach with their Gopnik buddies at 3:30 in the morning. They didn't look like any of that. They didn't look like OG Dutch-Irish kids. They didn't look Italian. Sure as shit didn't look Greek or like Sicilian. They weren't, it just so out of place. And the first thing that crossed my mind as soon as I saw them was, are they lost? So I'm sure protocol has changed over time, because in the late 90s, when you saw a Starbucks in your neighborhood, it was kind of already on the way to being over. Because, like, that's the normie shit that comes with gentrification. Like, once you see that, the clock is ticking. You get, like, organic dry cleaners and, like, artisanal beer and cheese places that don't cater to the locals or the natives. Bullshit like that. Like, and then pre-existing businesses sometimes change to the influx of these reptiles with nice hairdos and fucking ghouls with no redeeming social value. Like, there's this place here in Astoria called Bangkok Tasty, and it was basically like a Thai takeout place, but it was the best Thai takeout this side of the Mississippi. And then it renovated into the kind of place where, like, all the wait staff wears all black, like one of those places. Like, you could still show up in like a tank top and like shorts and flip-flops, yeah. And I'm sure if you like leave more than a decent tip, they'll overlook you looking like a fucking slob. Just don't show up in Crocs like a prick. Anyways, Bangkok Tasty turned into one of those places knowing they can extract more money from the people moving in crowd as opposed to like the locals that I suppose weren't so hip to, you know, food from other places. Because remember in like the 2000s when music and food We're like the song and dance of diversity. And even though diversity lowers every quantifiable quality of life metric across the board, as per, Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone. Look, hate facts aside, if you're one of those sensitive, thin-skinned, shrill, neurotic, squealing types. Anyways, I'm sure protocol has changed. Eventually, at the end of this protocol, you have people who are on the receiving end of a gavel being banged and being told to shut up because they're freaking out over the very thought of their artifact children sitting next to the spawn of those they've been pricing out since they moved in there. So I'm sure the beginning protocol is different. It's got to be. Because, like, Starbucks isn't that, like, kind of reference anymore. It's not that kind of thing like when the French used to talk about McDonald's in the 2000s when Bush was in office. Fucking cheese-eating surrender monkeys. You know what's really funny about the French? Alright, a lot, but let's take it one at a time. When people leave France, they seem pretty decent at the least, or pretty good people, better than that. But in France, they're some of the most contemptible, snooty, just so unpleasant. And not just over in France, but the ones in, like, Montreal, over in Canada. You know, I went to a cafe in Montreal. I went there a long time ago, but to make a long story short, I go to the counter and, bonsoir, comment allez-vous, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, hi, can I get a large coffee with a little bit of half and half? Now, I hadn't seen that much eye rolling since the last exorcism I've been to. Then she spoke to me like I was an ESL student in special needs, complete with the over-enunciating her mouth like I'm deaf, so I have to read lips. And even then, that's like an insensitive amount of like mouth action going on. And she goes, "To stay or to go, sir?" And yeah, I imagine they're just as shitty over in France, if not more so, because they're closer to the source, right? You know what's funny about the French? I know, we're getting to it. Just fucking don't grab your ankles. It's not SummerSlam, all right? But, well, first of all, France has mostly been governed by prostitutes, according to Mark Twain. And it's funny because, like, affairs and slinging dick and just being general libertine Lotharios speaking that droll, monotone gobbledygook. What's really funny about them is that in Canada, the French are looked down as white trash. You see, here in these United States, French and French cuisine and speaking French and French culture, it's seen as like a cultural flex. And in Canada, they're white trash. Like, try explaining to someone here in this country, like, white trash in jeans skiing down the side of a hill, or playing golf in jorts. And, all right, and they're speaking French. It's so bizarre. It's really hard to, like, get that through to my fellow Americans. A neighbor of mine, he moved from Montreal some years ago, and he once told me how back in the day, they used to call the French Canadians Pepsis or Peppers because Pepsi was 5 cents cheaper than Coca-Cola in the bottles. And of course, the poor, dirty kids got Pepsi. They gave them shit for it. he was really proud in his capacity of speaking French because he felt that it didn't make him come off like he was talking down to the animals. his words, not mine. Penina Rosenberg, 35, married mom of 2 in Midwood. All the basic stuff, milk, gas, eggs, butter, have increased, said Rosenberg, a manager for a doctor's office. I'm not the type of person who looks at prices most of the time, but when you see these kinds of increases, it's a shock. Well, lottie fucking da. She used to fill up her gas tank for $40 once a week. Now it's $65, a difference of $1,000 monthly. It's a lot of money, she says, adding that her husband, an electrician, has curbed car rides. Now we walk everywhere and we don't use the car to save money on gas. My husband doesn't go out much either. We try not to go anywhere and spend money we don't have right now. A family of 4 typically goes through 2 gallons of milk weekly, but the rice in price, $3.80 a gallon, even in the most expensive stores, she says, have gone up to $5 a gallon. The difference can cost her family $10 a month, just on that alone. Her 2 young daughters feast on eggs. They go through 3 dozen weekly. Jesus, what are they, lifting? But the cost has surged from $2.99 to $5 a carton, costing an extra $24 monthly. We're trying to cut expenses like eating fewer eggs, she said. There are obviously no snacks right now, like chocolates, candy, even fruits. Even fruits? Oh no. It's hard, but the prices are insane. Otherwise, I won't be able to fit everything in a budget. Wow, so even people who weren't in bad shape when this started are in bad shape. It kind of reminds me of that one bit from It's Always Sunny, where Mac is telling Charlie about, oh, what are all these new people? And he goes like, oh, they're new poor, we're old poor. And speaking of paying more for less, that has been part and parcel of life since maybe 2008, when the market collapsed, which, as long as no one calls it a depression, or the Second Great Depression, or the Greatest Depression, or the Great Depression 2.0, or the Big Sad, as long as no one calls it what it is, it's out of sight, out of mind. And not just in the West. I mean, yeah, China's economy has been doing good numbers for a while. Never mind the ghost cities. Never mind, like, the quality of things over there. Never mind how it's been becoming a shoddy tier surveillance state tin pot dictatorship because those at the top have realized that decades of resources have been squandered by the CCP, so they're bracing for economic collapse. And they're also surrounded by 14 countries that hate its guts, and their loan shark behavior isn't exactly welcomed with open arms these days. Like, they had more of a head start than anyone else strip mining Africa, and they're already lining their ducks up in a row to start strip mining Latin America. I mean, after all, the first and oldest Chinatown in that hemisphere is in Panama. Much like, you know, throwing Chinese people and dynamite and misery at mountains and forests to create railroads across these United States, that's how they also built the Panama Canal. So anyways, this paying more for less stuff and the language used to discuss it, it's kind of bizarre. Like, a couple months ago, the word shrinkflation was making the rounds. Like, to kind of ease the blow of disappointment in, like, the size of everything, like cereal boxes, paper towels, even Kit Kats are smaller. It's, you know, it's things like that that make me consider that other than some catastrophic event like the grid going down, there won't be a happening. At least insofar as network style, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore kind of happening. I mean, there might be, well, even if civil war happens, it's just going to boil down to rural versus cities, and cities just have the worst uphill battle ahead of them for such a thing. But there won't be a happening. It'll be a lot like The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot. I mean, we're already living it, what with the diminished expectations and paying more for less. But yeah, you know, maybe in my lifetime, we're going to look back on this era and it'll be called the Second Great Depression. Never mind the economy, though. Just in general, history won't be kind to the 2010s. All right, and keeping it in with the local, a teenager was killed by a gunman in Jackson Heights, Queens, Thursday night. An unidentified 18-year-old man was shot in the stomach at 3038 74th Street around 6:45. The teen and the shooter had been involved in an unspecified dispute before the argument turned deadly, cops said. The victim walked into Elmhurst Hospital after getting there by, quote, private transportation, end quote. He was later pronounced dead, according to the NYPD. The shooter was still on the loose late Thursday. Sanitation worker shot in the fucking leg. Oh boy. A Department of Sanitation worker was shot once in the leg in Hell's Kitchen Thursday after getting into a dispute with his daughter's ex-boyfriend, the police told the paper. The bullets rang out around 11 a.m. in front of 515 West 52nd Street, leaving the man wounded, cops said. The boyfriend and his brother had arrived at the daughter's apartment, prompting the woman to call her father, an NYPD spokeswoman said. Witness video shows the victim apparently kicking a man in the head multiple times on the sidewalk before he's shot by a third man. The suspects fled in a black Mercedes belonging to the victim. You know, would anyone even fucking give a shit if he wasn't a garbage man? Let's see. Hey, a naked man crept into an 80-year-old Chicago woman's bed and held her hostage for 17 hours, but she was finally rescued after her daughter called the cops because the woman hadn't texted the day's Wordle answers, WBBM TV reports. Denise Holt was asleep on Saturday when the mentally ill man broke into her home in the Windy City's Lincolnwood neighborhood, the station reported. The intruder identified a 32-year-old James H. Davis III, who was reportedly bloodied from a broken window, slipped into Holt's bed while clutching a pair of scissors, the station said. He then ordered her to take a bath with him in her nightgown. After the bath, he dragged her around the house, disconnected the phones, and took a couple of knives from the kitchen before taking her to the bathroom in the basement, which he blocked with a chair. Eventually, Holt's daughter, Meredith Holt Caldwell, who lives in Seattle, noticed that her mother had not texted her about the day's Wordle, as she usually does. The family then called police, who responded to Holt's home about 9:40 p.m. Sunday. A SWAT team used a stun gun to overpower the man after an hours-long standoff. All right, Wordle, you win this round. All right, so Brooklyn's prestigious Poly Prep Country Day School became the first city school to make masks optional on Thursday. But state officials call this move a violation. Yeah. Meanwhile, a father of two from upstate New York was seen on video being forcibly tossed from a school board meeting this week after refusing to wear a mask. Dave Callis was unmasked while sitting in a chair watching a presentation at a Board of Education meeting in Webster on Tuesday night when a security guard approached him and asked him to put on a face covering. Callis told the guard, "Thank you," but refused to cover up. The officer persisted, saying, "No, you need to put your mask on right now." The security guard then dragged Callis' chair toward to confront the security guard. Oh, wait, I fucked that up. The security guard then dragged Callis' chair toward the back of the room. Callis turned around to confront the security guard and then was pushed out of the back door. Video posted to the Facebook page, ROC for Educational Freedom Public Page shows. Yeah. I mean, on one hand, it's assault, and on the other hand, how dare you not cover up your face? Which, of course, won't hold up in a court of law, and such things have no recourse, like arresting people for keeping their businesses open because reasons. I know that is a gross oversimplification and compartmentalization of things people are going through, but, like, it's... I wonder how much longer this is going to go on for, you know? This has all been a glaring reminder of how, like, the state is kind of like an alcoholic. Very obvious solutions to their problems are ignored because of ego, and having to accept these solutions makes them look stupid. You know, like, hey, how about you not drink? Or, hey, how about no mandates? See where that gets you. So to give some context, we're approaching 2 years of everything being locked down because of Chinese lung herpes. I don't know if it was like this in your neck of the woods, but it was, first of all, it was kind of eerie because everything ground to a halt. And this is the only time other than snow shutting down the city and where you were able to walk down the middle of roads and there was no traffic. It was more than too quiet, and every couple of moments it felt like a random encounter was going to happen on the world map, as if I were traversing an RPG or some shit. It was so quiet. It's the only time in my life I ever understood, oh, too quiet, I get it now. So we're approaching almost 2 years of that. It was really sad to see businesses close down and hey, we're going to be back in May, and it was like August and it was still closed. I remember the summer of 2020 was particularly ridiculous. Like, there were parts of, like, downtown where it straight up felt like open air parties, and, you know, Chinese lung herpes mandates and restrictions are, like, really loosened up in summer. And yeah, I'll spare you the whole, you won't get sick at a protest or a rally, but, you know, you have to stand 6 feet apart at your Nana's funeral. It was kind of wild, though. Like, no matter what, the liquor stores and the dispensaries and the abortion clinics had to stay open, but, you know, you could get snitched on for going to church. There was always, like, someone's yaya standing by the door of all the churches here, making sure, like, the coast was clear. Imagine that, huh? Just making sure the coast is clear so you could go to church. It's fucking ridiculous. And, you know, I'm sure you've seen those pictures online where you'd see people in corporate costume outfits, like the mascot things, and it's like, how the fuck am I an essential worker? Anyways, as little sense as that makes, this whole thing makes close to zero sense. Like mandates, gene-altering mystery fluid. Right now, there's this bizarre trucker ordeal going on in the first post-national country in the world, led by Fidel Castro's son. I've been saying that shit for years, and I'm so glad it's now finally, like, no longer this weird thing you say behind, like, you know, your hand in a hushed tone as you lean back in your chair, and hopefully the other person does too. I hope to see more baby mama drama aired out over the years, like how Prince Harry is half Princess Di, half stable boy. Doesn't fucking resemble Charles a bit. Oh, and then Black Lives Matter looted Pride Month, and then, you know, Black Trans Lives Matter. And that was weird because you weren't allowed to talk about who were was putting those black trans lives in harm's way in the first place. Yes, black trans lives matter, but, like, people would speak about it as if there were, like, some Southern Gothic looking house that had acres of land and where, like, black trans men and women were forced to, like, run for it, and one by one they're picked off by some old white man in a seersucker suit cackling as he reloads his rifle between shooting. That's how they made it seem like it was happening every minute of every hour of every day across the country. Like that, because we weren't allowed to ask who was putting these black trans lives in danger. Kind of like how Black Lives Matter never discusses black on black crime. Oh no, FBI crime statistics. That's a hate fact. That's because we live in mumbo jumbo times. I've call it what you will. People are fond of clown world, and but there's no bloodlust. There's no edge. It has no thief to it. It just feels like honk honk, notice and move on. No, it removes the bewilderment of it all, like words mean things being wrapped and piped in chains and lit on fire and wrapped up in a Persian rug and thrown off someone's roof, or everyone coloring outside the lines, or like women becoming men and men becoming like weaker, sadder versions of their grandfathers. Like, just summing all that up with clown world just doesn't really do it justice. Oh, Democrats suddenly supporting foreign intervention with foaming at the mouth talking points and being lockstep, and, you know, like, it just... It was so sad to see the very same people who jumped up and down and cried and shat their pants over George Bush lamenting us leaving Afghanistan and, you know, really wanting to put the boots to, like, Assad and Putin, and evidently it was really important for us to fight on behalf of the Ukraine because reasons. And these are the same hysterical people who blamed Russia for the 2016 election, and I don't know, maybe that's like a weird holdover of the Cold War, and like, you know, the last of the old guard. Like, there's like this 103-year-old man in a wheelchair, and he just has to eat the insides of like fucking embryos to stay alive, and his name is Holden Bloodfeast, and he sits at the board of directors of Raytheon, and he just wants to see someone get turned into hamburger meat one last time before he finally goes into the light. And then he goes, guys, heaven's kind of hot. The Democrats voted for that. His name is Joe Biden, and he has dementia, and he stole the election. It's even Super Predator was unprepared with this shit. And you know what's sad? Him winning the election sort of marked like a period of like, no one just complains about things anymore. They just get ready to be disappointed, and they are. Like, trickle-truthing themselves into easing the blow of how shitty things are. You know? Like, rather than wake up and smell the noise, they're taking the Band-Aid approach, which I imagine helps tremendously with this whole paying more for less ordeal we've been subjected to.
Alright, so let's see what's in the paper. Super Bowl Bettor's Guide. Who will win the big game plus Sunday's best prop bets? See sports. Alright, well, you heard it here first, folks. Sports ball is in serious trouble, and not just cause cord cutting is a very real thing. You see the crowds for these events, it's pitiful. Long gone are the days when Sports Center ruled the world. I wonder whatever happened to all those dudes that would order Tex-Mex and just zone out to Sports Center. Oh, and ladies, if you're involved with a guy, no matter how serious or not serious it is, and he ever cried over a sports game, You have a decision you got to make. Let's see. Biden's inflation has average household paying $276 per month more compared to 1 year ago. Inflation continues to climb after President Biden's spendapalooza, reaching 7.5%, the biggest annual increase in 40 years. The average household is shelling out nearly $300 more than it was a year ago for groceries, gas, and necessities. Yeah, I was just talking about this. Rising prices overwhelm wage hikes. Blaming... Oh, look at this cocksucker over here. Stephen Moore is a senior economist at FreedomWorks. He served as a senior economic advisor to Donald Trump, and he goes, blaming greedy corporations is bogus. All right. I took the bait. Let's see what this cocksucker has to say. President Biden blames inflation on powerful and greedy corporations, jacking up prices to pump up their profits, and, let's see. So he's like, remember that number the next time Biden says he won't raise taxes on those making less than for $100,000 a year. Sorry, Joe, the policies already have. Median household spending is about $64,000 a year, according to the Census Bureau. So this means Bidenflation snatched an extra $3,520 out of typical family paychecks this past year. That's more than $280 a week. Yeah, but, then again, there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. Let's see. He's right on this, though. Why are the prices surging now? One factor is $2 trillion of borrowing and more than $5 trillion of extra spending this past year. More money means more inflation, period. Then there is the war on American energy. We are producing a lot less energy here at home. Production is down from its pre-pandemic peak under Trump. So that allows the real price gougers, OPEC, to jack up the prices. Right, but this guy's conflating greedy corporations and faceless multinationals with the fucking federal government and OPEC. Stupid. Let's see. Hey, all right, let's bring it back. Here in Diker Heights, they start talking to family members about shit, and they're like, all right, Nick Badalato, 52, married with a young son in Diker Heights. Retired NYPD Lieutenant Nick Badalato said he's feeling a big pinch in his pocket from the record-high inflation that jacked up the price of his electric and gas bills, meat and groceries, and personal care products. His monthly costs to pay utility bills and necessities jumped about 20%, from $3,000 to $3,060. His Con Ed electrical bill skyrocketed from $185.90 in December to $280.46 in January. Hey, if anyone out there here in the city is listening, let me know exactly how much your Con Ed went up. I mean, my Con Ed went up, but that's because I work from home and I gotta fucking play hurry up and wait for Zoom calls in a shirt and tie and basketball shorts. Yeah, I'm lucky to do all that shit on my desktop, and praise be to fucking whoever on the other side I gotta sacrifice a goat under a full moon to. I could do it on my desktop and not some sort of workbook ridden with spyware and keyloggers that take snapshots at random intervals and always record even when it isn't on with the little red light. And then everything from like drunk sloppy hookups to like solemnly eating alone is recorded with visual and audio and then sent out to like big data and marketing firms. Hey, any concrete jungle head shrinkers out there know who I should give a four-legged animal of what, if not a goat? Let me know. So, Nick Badalato goes, Badalato and wife Dawn, who works part-time as a stenographer, reside in leafy Diker Heights in southern Brooklyn. He noted how he pays about $9,000 in property taxes, which are rising 5 to 8% a year due to the increase in market value. He goes, we have no control of the costs. It's out of our control, he said. We're on a fixed budget. We're scaling back, foregoing travel. I gave up the filet mignon sirloin. The price is up about 25%, he said. Dawn would like to move elsewhere.
but they both have adult children and family nearby that have kept them in New York. Their youngest child, Nicholas, is 9. He goes, even though we're middle class, it's not enough to live comfortably in New York City, he said. It's sad to see middle and lower class people suffering. How about that? I mean, the only thing I disagree with is, like, having to tell themselves they're middle class. Because, I suppose it looks that way, but, you know, there's just haves and have-nots now. Like, if anyone's listening, can you let me know if there's a middle class somewhere in your neighborhood or area? I mean, I'm sure they exist, but, you know, there's a difference between looking at a picture of the pyramids at Giza in an encyclopedia and then going to Giza. You know what an encyclopedia is, right? Hey, it's fucking tough out there, alright? You think I'm joking? Over in Pennsylvania, thousands of honeybees were stolen from a grocery store headquarters after a rash of hive raids on Long Island. Bunch of assholes swiped at least 60,000 insects from Giant Co's pollinator-friendly field in Carlisle. Like that, alright, I get cars, I get food, I get, you know, hijacking cigarette and, like, petrol trucks, but fucking bees? Listen, don't take it from me. Times are fucking hard and even bees are getting stolen. Now, I know not all of you live in blue cities surrounded by red, but here in New York, it's not as bad as it is in a place like San Francisco. But, yeah, just people walking out with gym bags of shoplifted stuff. I mean, like Rite Aids, you know, they can't, you know, they don't really have much recourse. As opposed to a store like Gristedis, which is like a high-end, fancy pants supermarket. You see, they get to have extra security because their clientele are, you know, people with money. Like, Gristedis is like one step above, like, fucking Trader Joe's in terms of, like, you know, ritzy bullshit you could go without. But, they could afford the extra private security. But, nah, the rest of you unwashed plebs who, like, you know, you gotta go to Rite Aid, and then the Rite Aid is closed down. It's weird. This happens for a number of reasons. Here in New York City, ever since Chinese lung herpes and the lockdowns, the cops are basically not pursuing what is considered to be like minor infractions, I suppose. They stopped pursuing quality of life crimes. I mean, and I don't even want to call it San Francisco light, because as fucked up as it is here, it's nowhere near as bad as the junky and dog shit strewn plains of San Francisco. I mean, parts of Philly, I mean, those are a great contender for that, but, you know, we don't have much here. We do have corners of, you know, and pockets of fucked up neighborhoods, but nothing like stretches of West Philadelphia or the Skid Row Thunderdome or the entirety of fucking San Francisco. Still, though, like, the shoplifting is there, and the shoplifting is bad enough to make a Rite Aid close. You know, it's always interesting to note what the shoplifting class here does and does not covet. I'd like to think they're along the same lines as shoplifters in a place like San Francisco, and I can't pretend to know what they're interested in and what they're not. Personally, I remain slightly baffled by their choices. You know, most of us here can note one great growth industry in our city for the past couple of years, and that is the boom and often flimsy plastic guards and shelf locks that now cover row after row in convenience stores, pharmacies, Walgreens, CVS. It's wild. You know, thefts like even of the smallest shit have grown enormously in recent years. There's a large number of people here who seem to regard our city's stores as some kind of free buffet that can be picked away as they like. How many of us have seen people walk into a store and walk out with something they haven't paid for? Happens all the time. And in a city where such crimes are viewed with increasing acceptance, it's hardly the fault of the store owners that they're trying to limit shoplifting by putting their products up behind locked guard devices. Still, the pattern of theft is confusing. I can confirm Al Sharpton's observation that almost all toothpaste in this city is now locked behind plastic guards. Strangely enough, however, in my local CVS, the toothbrushes are not. Who are the thieves who covet toothpaste but not an accompanying toothbrush? It's hard to know. You might imagine that it only applies to the most expensive items that are put behind plastic guardrails, but this is not the case. Almost all makeup is openly available on the shelves, and many other, even more expensive items are as well. But the seemingly random selection process continues, to the confusion and frustration of a small number of us who actually head to the tills with our shopping. Now, at the CVS near my place, a packet of 12 ribbed latex condoms sits on an open shelf with a price tag of $18.99 before taxes. Whereas just above it, of almost equal value, sits a bottle of something called Zerexin, which promises me is the world's strongest enhancer and works in under an hour. The latter is firmly behind lock and key. If I wish to get a bottle of said Zerexin, I would have to call a store assistant to help me. Although, I'd probably die of secondhand embarrassment before asking for such a thing. At best, after calling for assistance, I would watch what would feel like hours as she came slouching towards me with her huge bunch of keys and chains, trying every key one after another to unlock the product. Only then for her call to a colleague, "What is the price of this male sex performance enhancer?" By which point I would have dropped my shopping bag and fled to another store than the average shoplifter. Everywhere the same odd priorities reign. In a local store here, cheapo anti-dandruff shampoo sits behind a lock while vast bottles of Listerine do not. Shaving cream sits openly on a shelf, but cheap safety razors are locked away. Vast multi-packs of luxury quilted toilet paper sits almost invitingly on the shelves, just calling out to people to walk out with them, while laundry detergent, opposite of this, is locked up like it's in Fort Knox. So what does this tell us? A professional profiler from the NYPD. It's okay, we don't have to get the FBI involved, okay? Just take it easy. They could probably work out precisely the sort of thief we're dealing with here. They apparently aspire to be minty-mouthed, clean-shaven, sexually enhanced citizens with good laundry. Whereas they must, by necessity, end up having safe, ribbed sex while covered in shaving cream, smelling of Listerine with enough quilted toilet paper to just give away. Or more likely, they're picking up items in bulk that can easily be sold out the back of a van. There's an odd hilarity in all this becoming normal, but there is also tragedy to it as well. The tragedy is that crime has risen in this city, and it is the stores and us working stiffs and jerks and losers who have to adjust our behavior to fit around the life choices of criminals. For millions of New Yorkers, the whole business of the most basic shopping has become belabored with inconvenience. Convenience stores are anything but, and so inevitably more of us end up buying our basics online, and our city's much-needed stores die a little more with each click of the computer and each tap of our grubby little fingers on a phone screen. Yet there are ways around this. I mean, sure, this city could take even comparatively minor crimes like shoplifting seriously again. Who are we kidding? It seems that only murder grabs the attention of our present district attorney. But there's no reason why this city could not make sure that those who regard our stores as a free-for-all are made to pay. And not just in the stores, but, If we're gonna have central bookings being a fucking revolving door for things other than quality of life crimes, like, come on, whatever happened to all those citations and violations that used to be issued on the regular? I mean, if decriminalized and legalized marijuana have made criminal cartels and criminal elements to kick up at the end of every week or month and fill in the void left behind from narcotics with human trafficking, then what the fuck is the NYPD and the court system doing to supplement their loss of shitty little tickets and violations? Ah, well, what a shame that our city has chosen to lock up our toothpaste instead.
What's up, ladies and jerks? You like things that don't suck. So for more of the finest garbage this side of meat space, come on down to the Trashradio Patreon. I can't promise that my buttery, trashy voice will stop rearranging things in your living room when you're not home.